Dr. Daniel Carter wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at the screen in front of him. He had been working in his small research lab since sunrise, studying samples from the strange animals that lived on New Haven. This planet was nothing like Earth. The trees were taller, the air was cleaner, and the creatures were unlike anything humans had ever seen before. Daniel had lived here for 15 years. He was a scientist who studied alien life forms. His lab stood at the edge of a massive forest that the colonists called the Emerald Woods. Most days were quiet, filled with research and data collection. Today would be different. The morning started like any other. Daniel was looking at cells under his microscope when the entire building began to shake. At first, he thought it was an earthquake. The equipment rattled on the tables. Books fell from shelves. Then he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. It was a cry, but not from any animal he knew. The sound was deep and full of pain. It echoed across the valley and seemed to come from right outside his lab. Daniel rushed to the door and threw it open. What he saw made him freeze in place. A dragon stood in the clearing in front of his lab. A real dragon. It was enormous, at least 40 feet from nose to tail. Its scales were green and silver, shining in the morning light. Large wings were folded against its body. But what struck Daniel most were its eyes. They were intelligent eyes, sad eyes, eyes that were crying. The dragon lowered its massive head to the ground. In its front claws, it held something small. Daniel took a careful step forward. His heart was pounding. He had never seen anything like this before. No one had. Dragons were supposed to be myths from old Earth stories. The dragon pushed the small bundle toward him with its snout. Then it stepped back and made a soft, pleading sound. Daniel moved closer and saw what it was carrying. A baby dragon. It was about the size of a large dog with dull gray scales. It wasn't moving. The mother dragon cried again. Tears actually rolled down her scaled face and fell to the ground. She looked at Daniel, then at her baby, then back at Daniel. She was asking for help. There was no doubt about it. Daniel knelt beside the small dragon. His hands shook as he pulled out his medical scanner. The device beeped and showed him readings he could barely believe. The baby was alive, but barely. Some kind of infection had filled its lungs. Without treatment, it would die within hours. He looked up at the mother dragon. She watched him with desperate hope in her eyes. How did she know to come here? How did she know he might be able to help? These questions would have to wait. I'll try, Daniel said out loud, not sure if she could understand. I'll do everything I can. The mother dragon made a low sound that might have been gratitude. Daniel carefully lifted the baby dragon. It was heavier than it looked. He carried it toward his lab while the mother followed. But she was too big to fit through the door. She pressed her face against the clear wall, watching as Daniel brought her baby inside. Her breath fogged the glass. Her eyes never left her child. Daniel laid the baby dragon on his examination table. He had treated hundreds of alien creatures in his career, but never anything like this. The scanner showed the infection spreading through the baby's respiratory system. It was caused by some kind of parasite he had never seen before. He worked quickly, pulling up data files and running tests. His computer started analyzing the parasite's structure. Daniel mixed chemicals and prepared compounds, trying to find something that would kill the infection without harming the dragon. Outside, the mother never stopped watching. She made small sounds, whimpers that any parent would recognize, the sound of a mother watching her child suffer. "Hold on, little one," Daniel whispered as he worked. "Just hold on." The baby's breathing was getting worse. Each breath was a struggle. Daniel's hands moved faster. He had to synthesize an anti-parasitic drug that would work with the dragon's unique biology. One wrong ingredient and he could poison the creature instead of saving it. His computer finally gave him a formula. It was a guess based on similar compounds he had used before. There was no time to test it properly. He loaded the medicine into an injector and approached the baby dragon. "Please, let this work," he said. He found a spot on the creature's shoulder where the scales were softer and pushed the injector against the skin. There was a soft hiss as the medicine went in. The baby dragon didn't even react. It was too weak. Daniel stepped back and watched the monitors. The mother dragon pressed harder against the window, making desperate sounds. Minutes passed. Nothing changed. The baby's breathing was still weak and shallow. More minutes passed. Daniel started to lose hope. Maybe the medicine wasn't strong enough. Maybe he had been too late. Maybe there was nothing anyone could do. Then something changed. The readings on the monitor started to improve. Slowly at first, then faster. The baby dragon's breathing became easier. The color began to return to its scales, changing from dull gray to a soft green. Its eyes opened, revealing beautiful amber irises that glowed with inner light. Daniel let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. The baby dragon lifted its head slightly and made a small chirping sound. Outside, the mother dragon heard it. She stood up tall and cried out, but this time it was a sound of joy. Daniel opened the door and carefully carried the baby outside. The moment he stepped through the doorway, the mother rushed forward. She was so fast that Daniel almost dropped the baby in surprise. But she was gentle. She lowered her head and nuzzled her child with the tip of her snout. The baby dragon chirped again and tried to move its wings. It was weak but clearly recovering. The mother picked it up carefully in her claws and held it close to her chest. Then she looked at Daniel. What he saw in her eyes at that moment would stay with him forever. It was gratitude. Deep, genuine gratitude. But more than that, it was recognition. She knew what he had done. She understood that he had saved her child's life. The dragon bowed her head low, almost touching the ground. It was a gesture of respect and thanks. Daniel bowed back, not knowing what else to do. The mother dragon spread her wings. They were huge, blocking out the sun. With a powerful downward push, she launched into the air. Daniel watched as she flew higher and higher. Her baby held safely in her claws. She circled once above his lab, then flew toward the mountains in the distance. Within moments, she was just a speck against the clouds. Then she was gone. Daniel stood in the clearing for a long time. His mind was racing. Dragons were real. They were intelligent. They could cry. They could feel gratitude. Everything he thought he knew about life on New Haven had just changed. He went back inside his lab and sat down at his desk. His hands were still shaking. He needed to report this. The colonial government needed to know that there were dragons living in the mountains. Intelligent dragons. But something made him hesitate. What would happen if he told people? Would they want to study the dragons? Hunt them? Would they destroy the peace that clearly existed in those distant mountains? Daniel decided to wait. He would write up his notes and keep them private for now, at least until he understood more. He looked at the medical equipment still scattered across his examination table. The readings from the baby dragon were still on his screen. He saved all the data carefully. Something told him he might need it again. Daniel was right. 3 days later, the mother dragon came back. And she wasn't alone. Daniel was eating breakfast when he heard the sound of wings, heavy, powerful wings beating the air. He dropped his coffee cup and ran outside. The mother dragon was landing in the clearing, but this time she had brought others with her. 5 baby dragons lay in the grass where she had placed them. All of them looked sick. Their scales were dull and gray. Their breathing was labored and painful to hear. The mother dragon looked at Daniel with pleading eyes again. She made a low sound that clearly meant help them. Behind her, 3 more adult dragons landed. They were smaller than the mother, but still huge. Each one had brought sick babies. Daniel counted quickly. 8 young dragons in total, all dying from the same infection that had nearly killed the first baby. "Oh no," Daniel said. "This is bad. This is really bad." He realized he wasn't looking at a few sick animals. He was looking at an epidemic. Something was killing the dragon population, and if he didn't do something, an entire species might disappear. The adult dragons watched him with intelligent eyes. They didn't threaten him or make aggressive moves. They simply waited. They had seen him save 1 baby. They believed he could save these too. Daniel ran back inside and grabbed all his medical supplies. He set up multiple workstations in the clearing since he couldn't bring all the dragons inside. The adult dragons helped, gently moving their young to where Daniel pointed. It was amazing to see. They understood what he was trying to do and cooperated completely. He started with the sickest baby first. The scanner showed the same parasitic infection, but this one was more advanced. The baby's lungs were almost completely blocked. Daniel prepared a stronger dose of the medicine he had created before. The adult dragons watched every move he made. One of them, a blue-scaled male, leaned in close as Daniel gave the injection. Daniel tried not to show fear, but his hands shook. The dragon could kill him with 1 swipe of its claws. Instead, it made a soft rumbling sound that seemed almost like encouragement. The first baby responded to the medicine within 20 minutes. Its breathing eased and color returned to its scales. Daniel moved to the second baby, then the third. He worked through the morning and into the afternoon. Each injection had to be carefully measured. Each baby had to be monitored. The mother, Dragon from 3 days ago, stayed close to him the whole time. She seemed to have appointed herself as his protector. When Daniel stumbled from exhaustion, she used her tail to steady him. When he needed to reach a baby on the other side of the clearing, she gently picked him up in her claws and carried him over. By evening, 7 of the 8 babies were recovering. The 8th one was in serious trouble. It was the smallest, and the infection had damaged its lungs badly. Daniel gave it a double dose of medicine and waited. The adult dragons gathered around, watching silently. An hour passed, then 2 hours. Daniel checked the readings again and again. The baby's vital signs were improving, but very slowly. Too slowly. He mixed a different compound, something to help repair the damaged tissue. It was risky. He had never tested this combination before, but doing nothing meant watching the baby die. He gave the second injection and prayed it would work. The adult dragons seemed to sense the danger. They made low humming sounds together, a kind of chorus that filled the air. It sounded almost like singing. Then finally the baby's breathing strengthened. Its eyes opened. It made a weak chirping sound, and the adult dragons all sang louder. The baby was going to live. Daniel collapsed onto the grass, completely exhausted. The mother dragon lay down next to him. She was so big that he could lean against her warm scales. She made a rumbling sound that he felt through his whole body. It was comforting, like a cat's purr, but much deeper. The other adult dragons gathered their babies and prepared to leave. But before they flew away, each one approached Daniel and bowed their head. It was the same gesture of respect and gratitude the mother had shown before. Daniel bowed back to each one, tears running down his face. When the last dragon flew away, only the mother remained. She looked at Daniel for a long moment, then she did something unexpected. She regurgitated something onto the ground in front of him. At first, Daniel thought it was disgusting, but then he saw what it was. A crystal. It was about the size of his fist and glowed with a soft blue light. The mother dragon pushed it toward him with her snout, then stepped back. Daniel picked it up carefully. It was warm and seemed to pulse with energy. He pulled out his scanner and examined it. The readings made his eyes go wide. It was some kind of biological structure, but unlike anything he had ever seen. It contained what looked like neural tissue but crystallized. It was beautiful and impossible. "Thank you," Daniel said. "I don't know what this is, but thank you." The mother dragon bowed once more, then launched into the sky. Daniel watched her go, then looked down at the crystal in his hands. He had a feeling it was more than just a gift. It was a message. But what was it trying to say? Over the next 2 weeks, more dragons came. Word had spread somehow among their population. Every day, more adults arrived with sick babies. Daniel's small research station became a hospital. He barely slept, treating dragon after dragon. His medical supplies were running low. He realized he couldn't do this alone anymore. He needed help. He sent an emergency message to the colonial capital, asking for medical supplies and assistance. He didn't explain everything in the message. He just said there was a medical emergency with a newly discovered species. The response came faster than he expected. Governor Lisa Monroe arrived by transport ship with a full team. She was a tough woman in her 50s who had been running the colony for 10 years. She stepped off the ship looking skeptical. "Dr. Carter, your message said this was urgent," she said. "What kind of emergency are we talking about?" Daniel pointed to the clearing. 5 adult dragons were landing, each carrying sick young ones. Lisa stopped walking. Her mouth fell open. Her security team reached for their weapons. "Don't," Daniel said quickly. "They're not dangerous. They're parents seeking help for their children." Lisa stared at the dragons for a full minute without speaking. Then she turned to her team. "Put the weapons away. Dr. Carter is right. Those are parents, not threats." She walked closer to the dragons, slowly and carefully. The mother dragon, who had become a regular visitor, watched her approach. Lisa stopped a respectful distance away and bowed her head. The dragon bowed back. "Incredible," Lisa whispered. "They're intelligent. Fully intelligent." "Yes," Daniel said. "And they're dying. All of them. This infection is spreading through their entire population." Lisa immediately began organizing. She brought in 2 more scientists from the colony. Dr. Alex Bryant was a veterinary specialist who had treated dozens of alien species. Karen White was a linguist who studied animal communication. Together with Daniel, they formed a team dedicated to saving the dragons. Alex examined several of the sick babies and confirmed Daniel's diagnosis. The parasitic infection was aggressive and spreading fast. But she also found something else. The parasites showed signs of genetic modification. They weren't natural. "Someone made these," Alex said, showing Daniel the test results. "This is engineered. Someone created this disease deliberately." Karen worked with the adult dragons, trying to understand their communication. She set up recording equipment and played back the sounds they made at different speeds and frequencies. After days of work, she made a breakthrough. The dragons didn't just make sounds. The patterns of light that flickered across their scales were also part of their language. "They're talking to each other with bioluminescence," Karen explained. "The sounds carry emotion, but the light patterns carry detailed information. It's like they have 2 languages working together." Using her equipment, Karen could now translate basic concepts. The mother dragon, whom they had started calling Arya, was the matriarch of a large clan. She told them through Karen's devices that hundreds of dragons lived in the mountain ranges beyond the colony. The infection had already killed many of their young. Without help, the entire species would die out within a year. The news hit Daniel hard. It wasn't just a few sick animals. An entire intelligent species was facing extinction, and someone had caused it deliberately. "We need to find out who did this," Lisa said. "And we need to stop them before more dragons die." Alex worked day and night to improve the medicine Daniel had created. She developed a more effective formula that worked faster and had fewer side effects. But even with the better medicine, they were barely keeping up with the number of sick dragons arriving each day. Daniel stood in the clearing one evening, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Arya landed beside him and lowered her head. He reached out and touched her scales. They were warm and smooth. "We'll save your people," he promised. "Whatever it takes." Arya made a soft sound and touched his shoulder gently with her snout. In that moment, Daniel felt a connection deeper than words. They were from different worlds, different species, but they understood each other perfectly. They both knew what was at stake, and they both knew that time was running out. 3 weeks had passed since the dragons first arrived at Daniel's lab. The clearing around his research station now looked like a medical camp. Temporary shelters housed equipment and supplies. A dozen colonists had volunteered to help treat the endless stream of sick dragons that arrived each day. But Daniel noticed something troubling. The number of infected dragons was increasing, not decreasing. Even though they were saving hundreds of young dragons, more kept getting sick. It was as if the disease was spreading faster than they could treat it. Alex pulled him aside one morning, her face grim. "We have a serious problem," she said. "I've been tracking the infection rates. They're accelerating. This isn't just a disease running its course. Something is actively spreading it." She showed him data on her tablet. The graphs clearly indicated that new infections were appearing in areas where they had already treated the dragon population. "They're getting reinfected," Alex explained, "which means the source of the parasites is still active." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "We're not curing them. We're just buying them time." "Exactly. Unless we find and eliminate the source, this will never end." Karen joined them, carrying her translation equipment. She had been working with Arya and the other adult dragons, learning more of their language every day. "I asked Arya about when the sickness first started," she said. "She showed me something interesting." Karen played a recording. Arya's voice mixed with the visual patterns of light from her scales, which Karen's computer translated into English text. The message was clear. The sickness began about 6 months ago, shortly after loud machines came to the mountains where the dragons nested. "Machines?" Daniel asked. "What kind of machines?" Karen adjusted her equipment and played more of the translation. Arya had seen large metal vehicles digging into the mountainsides. They made terrible noises and released strange smells. Shortly after they arrived, the young dragons started getting sick. Lisa, who had been listening, pulled out her administrative tablet. "I'll check mining permits. No one should be operating in those mountains without authorization." She searched through the colonial database, her frown deepening. "There's nothing here. No permits, no authorized operations. Whoever is up there is doing it illegally." "We need to investigate," Daniel said. "If they're the source of the infection, we need to shut them down." Lisa nodded. "I'll arrange a reconnaissance flight, but it will take a few days to organize." "We don't have a few days," Alex said, pointing at her data. "At the current infection rate, we'll be overwhelmed within a week." Daniel made a decision. "Then we go now. Just a small team. We find out what's happening and report back." Lisa looked like she wanted to argue, but she saw the determination in his eyes. "Fine, but I'm coming with you. And we're bringing security." They assembled a team quickly. Daniel, Alex, Karen, Lisa, and 2 security officers named Jake Sullivan and Maria Torres. They loaded into a transport vehicle equipped with scientific equipment and emergency medical supplies. As they prepared to leave, Arya approached. Through Karen's translator, she made her intentions clear. She was coming with them. 3 other adult dragons landed nearby, also volunteering to help. Daniel tried to convince them to stay, but Arya was insistent. These were her children dying. She would help find the cause. The transport lifted off with the dragons flying alongside. They headed toward the mountain ranges, following the directions Arya provided. The landscape below changed from green forests to rocky highlands. After an hour of flight, they saw smoke rising from a valley. "There," Jake said, pointing. "That's not natural." They descended carefully, landing the transport in a hidden spot behind a ridge. The team climbed to the top and looked down into the valley. What they saw made Daniel angry. A large mining operation sprawled across the valley floor. Dozens of machines dug into the earth. Processing plants released thick smoke into the air. And worst of all, there were tanks connected to a distribution system that pumped something into the surrounding area. "That's how they're spreading it," Alex said, using binoculars to examine the setup. "Those tanks contain the parasites. They're deliberately releasing them into the environment." Maria used her scanner to check the company markings on the equipment. "Titan extraction," she reported. "They're a big corporation based on Earth. They must have set this up without permits." Lisa pulled out her communication device to call for backup, but Jake stopped her. "No signal. They're jamming communications." The dragons had landed nearby and were making distressed sounds. Arya stared at the mining operation with what could only be described as rage in her eyes. This was her home, her nesting grounds, and these humans were destroying it and killing her people. "We need evidence," Lisa said. "Pictures, data files, anything we can use to shut them down legally." Daniel nodded. "Alex and I will try to get into their main facility. If they're keeping records, that's where they'll be." "Too dangerous," Jake said. "Their security will stop you." "Not if we create a distraction," Karen suggested. She looked at Arya. "Can your dragons help us?" Through the translation device, Karen explained a plan. The dragons would approach from one side, drawing the security force's attention. While everyone was distracted, Daniel and Alex would sneak in from the other side, get the data they needed, and escape. Arya agreed immediately. The other dragons did too. Daniel felt guilty asking them to take such a risk, but they seemed almost eager. They wanted revenge for their dead children. The plan went into action an hour later. The 4 dragons flew over the ridge and descended toward the mining camp. Alarms immediately blared. Security personnel ran out with weapons. The dragons roared and swooped low, knocking over equipment and scattering workers. During the chaos, Daniel and Alex slipped down the far side of the valley. They reached the main building, a prefabricated structure that served as the command center. The door was locked, but Alex had brought tools. She had the lock open in under a minute. Inside, they found exactly what they were looking for, a computer terminal with full access to the operations records. Daniel plugged in a data drive and started downloading everything. Alex searched the physical files, taking pictures of documents with her tablet. What they found was damning. Titan extraction knew about the dragons. They had documented them as an intelligent species, but instead of reporting the discovery, they had decided the dragons were a problem. The creatures were territorial and protected their nesting grounds, which happened to sit on top of valuable platinum deposits. So Titan Extraction had created a biological weapon. They had engineered parasites specifically designed to kill dragon young. The plan was to wipe out the dragon population so they could mine without interference. The documents even had a name for the project. Operation Clean Slate, these monsters. Alex whispered, reading over Daniel's shoulder. They knew exactly what they were doing. They're committing genocide, Daniel said. For profit. The computer finished downloading. Daniel grabbed the data drive just as they heard voices approaching. They hid behind some filing cabinets as two workers entered the room. Did you see those things? One worker said. I thought dragons were just legends. Who cares? Once the new batch of parasites is released, they'll all be dead anyway. Then we can finally expand the operation. The workers left. Daniel and Alex waited a few more seconds, then slipped out of the building. They ran back up the valley slope, staying low. The dragons were still causing chaos in the camp. Security forces were trying to drive them away with sonic weapons, but the dragons were too fast and too smart. Daniel and Alex reached the rest of the team. We got everything, Daniel said, holding up the data drive. Let's go. Lisa signaled the dragons. Arya saw them and let out a loud cry. The four dragons immediately disengaged and flew toward the ridge. The team ran for their transport and jumped inside. Jake fired up the engines as bullets started hitting their hull. Hold on, Jake said, and the transport shot into the air. They escaped with the dragons flying beside them. Only when they were miles away did everyone breathe easier. Daniel looked at the data drive in his hand. This small device contained the evidence they needed to bring down Titan Extraction. But as they flew back to the colony, Alex voiced what everyone was thinking. Even if we shut them down, the parasites are already in the environment. They're self-replicating. Treating the infected dragons one by one isn't enough anymore. Then we need to do something bigger, Daniel said. We need a vaccine. Something that will protect the entire dragon population permanently. Karen nodded. But creating a vaccine will take time. And according to the documents you found, Titan Extraction is about to release another batch of parasites. Lisa was already making plans. I'll contact Earth authorities directly. With this evidence, they'll have to act. But you're right about the vaccine. That's our only long-term solution. Daniel looked out the window at Arya flying beside their transport. She had trusted him to help her people. Now he had to find a way to save them all. The data drive contained proof of Titan Extraction's crimes, but it also contained something else. All their research on the parasites. Every detail of how they were engineered. We can use their own research against them, Daniel said suddenly. They designed these parasites. The lab hummed with activity day and night. Daniel stood at his main computer terminal, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Beside him, Alex was running simulations on another screen. They had been working for 60 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. I think I have something, Alex said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. Look at this protein sequence. Daniel leaned over to examine her screen. The parasite had a specific protein marker that allowed it to attach to dragon lung tissue. If they could create antibodies that blocked that protein, the parasites wouldn't be able to infect the dragons. This could work, Daniel said, feeling hope for the first time in days. But we need to test it. On what? Alex asked. We can't risk testing on the dragons themselves. If we're wrong, we could kill them, Daniel thought for a moment. We have tissue samples from the dragons we've treated. We can test the vaccine on those samples first, see if it produces the right antibodies. They spent the next 12 hours synthesizing the vaccine compound and running laboratory tests. The results were promising. The antibodies formed correctly and attached to the parasite protein markers. In theory, the vaccine should work. Karen entered the lab carrying her translation equipment. Arya wants to know what's happening. All the dragons are getting anxious. Daniel rubbed his tired eyes. Tell her we think we have a vaccine, but we haven't tested it yet. It could work. Or it could be dangerous. Karen used her devices to communicate with Arya through the window. The mother dragon listened, then made a series of sounds and light patterns. Karen looked surprised. What did she say? Daniel asked. She wants to be the first test subject. She says if there's any risk, she'll take it so no young dragons are harmed. Daniel felt emotion well up in his chest. Tell her no. It's too dangerous. We need more time, but Arya was insistent. Through Karen's translation, she made her position clear. Her people were dying every day. Young dragons were suffering while the humans ran their tests. If this vaccine might work, they needed to try it now. She trusted Daniel. If he had created it, she would take it. Lisa arrived with news. I've been in contact with Earth authorities. They're sending investigators, but it will take 2 weeks for them to arrive. Titan Extraction has powerful lawyers already filing motions to delay everything. 2 weeks? Alex said, we don't have 2 weeks. According to their timeline, they're releasing more parasites in 3 days. I know, Lisa said grimly, which is why I've authorized a raid on their facility. We're going to shut them down ourselves. Jake and Maria were already assembling a team. They had 20 security officers ready to go. But everyone knew Titan Extraction wouldn't give up without a fight. They had private security forces and heavy weapons. This could turn into a battle, Jake warned. Are we prepared for that? Daniel looked outside at the dozens of dragons waiting silently. We won't be alone. The dragons will help us. That evening, they finalized both plans. One team would raid the Titan Extraction facility and destroy their parasite production equipment. The other team would begin vaccinating the dragon population, starting with Arya. Daniel prepared the injection carefully. His hands were steady despite his exhaustion. He had done this hundreds of times now, giving medicine to sick dragons, but this was different. This wasn't treating an illness. This was prevention, and if he had made any mistakes in the vaccine formula, Arya could die. She waited in the clearing, calm and patient. Around her, hundreds of dragons had gathered. It seemed like every dragon on the planet had come to witness this moment. They filled the clearing and covered the hillsides. Their scales glittered in the sunset light. Daniel walked out with the injection. Karen stood beside him with her translation equipment. Arya, are you absolutely sure about this? He asked. Through Karen, Arya's answer came back clear. She was the matriarch. She was the one who had first trusted the humans. She would be the first to receive this vaccine. If it worked, her people would live. If it failed, at least she would have tried everything to save them. Daniel nodded, his throat tight. He pressed the injector against Arya's shoulder and administered the vaccine. She didn't flinch. The medicine went into her bloodstream, and now all they could do was wait. Alex monitored Arya's vital signs with a scanner. At first, nothing happened. Then Arya's body temperature began to rise slightly. Her breathing quickened. Daniel's heart raced. Was this a normal immune response or something going wrong? Her body is producing antibodies, Alex said, watching the readings carefully. Lots of them. This is good. This is what we want to see. They waited for 2 hours. Arya remained calm the entire time, even as her body fought to create immunity. The other dragons watched in complete silence. Finally, Alex smiled. It worked. Her blood is full of antibodies against the parasite. She's immune. Relief flooded through Daniel. The dragons around them seemed to sense the good news. They made sounds of celebration, a chorus of cries that echoed across the valley. But there was no time to celebrate for long. They needed to vaccinate every dragon on the planet, and they needed to do it fast. Daniel, Alex, and their team of volunteers began the massive undertaking. They worked through the night, vaccinating dragon after dragon. The creatures were remarkably cooperative. They lined up patiently, waiting their turn. Parents brought their young. Elders who had lived in the mountains for decades came down to receive the vaccine. It was an incredible sight. While the vaccination was happening, Jake led the raid team toward the Titan extraction facility. They flew in low, using the darkness for cover. This time they weren't sneaking around. This was a direct assault. The dragons came with them. Arya, now immune to the parasites, led a squadron of 20 adult dragons. They were done being victims. They were going to fight back. The attack began at midnight. The dragons descended on the facility like a storm. They smashed equipment, destroyed vehicles, and scattered the security forces. Jake's team moved in behind them, heading for the parasite production facility. Titan extraction security tried to fight back, but they were unprepared for an attack by dragons. The creatures were fast, smart, and motivated. They targeted the weapons and machinery with precision. Nothing that moved was left operational. Jake and his team reached the main production building. Inside, they found the tanks where the parasites were grown. There were thousands of gallons of the infectious material, ready to be released into the environment. Set charges on everything, Jake ordered. We're destroying all of it. Maria and the other officers placed explosives throughout the facility. They had 10 minutes to evacuate before the charges went off. As they retreated, the Titan extraction supervisors tried to stop them. You can't do this, one supervisor shouted. This is corporate property. You'll go to prison. You committed genocide against an intelligent species, Jake shot back. You're the ones going to prison. The charges detonated right on schedule. The explosions lit up the night sky. The entire facility went up in flames. The parasite tanks ruptured, but the fire consumed the infectious material before it could spread. Within an hour, nothing remained except smoking ruins. The dragons circled overhead, crying out in triumph. Their enemy had been defeated. The source of the plague that killed their children was destroyed. Back at the research station, Daniel and his team continued vaccinating dragons. By dawn, they had administered the vaccine to over 300 individuals. But according to Arya, there were at least 200 more living in the remote mountain caves. We need to go to them, Daniel said. Some of the dragons are too old or too sick to make the journey here. Lisa arranged for transport vehicles. Daniel, Alex, and Karen loaded up medical supplies and headed into the mountains, guided by Arya. They flew over stunning landscapes, rocky peaks and hidden valleys where no humans had ever been. The dragons led them to secret places, ancient nesting grounds where dragons had lived for thousands of years, caves filled with crystalline formations that glowed with natural light. It was a magical world that humans had never known existed. The elder dragons were suspicious at first. They had never seen humans before, but Arya vouched for Daniel and his team. She showed them her immunity to the parasites and explained that these humans were friends, not enemies. One by one, the ancient dragons accepted the vaccine. Some were so old their scales had turned silver. They had lived through centuries and seen things beyond imagination. Yet they trusted the word of their matriarch and allowed the humans to help them. Daniel vaccinated a dragon that Arya identified as the eldest of all their kind. She was over 300 years old and barely able to fly anymore, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. Through Karen's translator, she thanked Daniel. "You have saved us, small human. My people will never forget this. We thought we would die with no one knowing we ever existed. Instead, we will live and we will remember your kindness." Daniel felt tears on his face. "Thank you for trusting us. Thank you for giving us the chance to help." The vaccination campaign took 4 days to complete. They traveled to every dragon settlement in the mountain ranges. By the end, over 500 dragons had received the vaccine. The entire species was now immune to the engineered parasites. On the 5th day, they returned to the research station exhausted but victorious. Lisa was waiting with news. 6 months had passed since the vaccine program ended. Daniel stood on the balcony of his expanded research facility and watched the morning sun rise over the mountains. The valley below was alive with activity. Dragons soared through the air, their scales catching the light like jewels. The facility had grown substantially. What started as a small research lab was now a full xenological institute. The colonial government had provided funding to establish a permanent center for studying and protecting the dragons. Scientists from across the colony volunteered to work there. Alex walked out onto the balcony carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Daniel and stood beside him watching the dragons. "Hard to believe it's only been half a year," she said. "Feels like a lifetime ago." Daniel nodded. "Everything changed that day Arya brought her dying child to me. I thought I was just saving one baby dragon. I had no idea it would lead to all this." Below them, a group of young dragons played in the clearing. They chased each other and practiced flying, their movements clumsy but enthusiastic. Several adult dragons watched over them protectively. Every single one of those young dragons had been vaccinated. They were the first generation to grow up without fear of the plague. Karen emerged from the building, looking excited. "Daniel, you need to see this. We just had a breakthrough in translation." They followed her to the linguistics lab where computer screens displayed complex patterns of sound and light. Karen had been working tirelessly to fully understand dragon language. She pulled up a recording of Arya speaking. "Listen to this," Karen said, playing the audio, "and watch the light patterns on the screen." The sounds were beautiful, like music mixed with natural noise. But when Karen's computer translated the light patterns, words appeared on the screen. Complete sentences with grammar and structure. "They have a written language," Karen explained. "The light patterns on their scales aren't just communication. They're writing. They can record information and pass it down through generations." Daniel stared at the screen in amazement. "They're more advanced than we thought." "Much more," Karen agreed. "I've been talking with the elder dragons. They have oral histories going back thousands of years. Stories, knowledge, culture. They're not just intelligent animals. They're a civilization. This changed everything." The colonial government would need to recognize the dragons not just as a protected species, but as a sentient civilization with rights. Lisa had already started the legal process, but this new evidence would speed things up considerably. A young researcher named Peter Collins rushed into the lab. "Dr. Carter, you need to come outside. Something's happening." They hurried out to find dozens of dragons landing in the clearing. This wasn't unusual anymore, but there was something different about today. The dragons were carrying things: crystals, metalwork, woven materials. They were bringing gifts. Arya landed in front of Daniel and made a series of sounds. Karen quickly set up her translation equipment. "She says today is important," Karen translated. "The dragons are holding a ceremony. They want to formally thank the humans who saved them." More dragons arrived, filling the valley. Daniel estimated there were over 400 dragons present. Nearly the entire species had come. They arranged themselves in a huge circle around the research facility, with the elders at the center. The eldest dragon, the one who was over 300 years old, approached. She moved slowly, her ancient body struggling with each step, but her eyes were bright and alert. She carried something in her claws, a crystal similar to the one Arya had given Daniel months ago, but much larger. Through Karen's translator, the elder spoke. "Human Daniel Carter, you saved my people when we faced extinction. You asked for nothing in return. You risked your own life to protect ours. Such selfless action deserves recognition." The elder placed the large crystal at Daniel's feet. "This is a memory crystal. It contains the complete history of our species. Every story, every piece of knowledge, every memory of our ancestors. We give this to you so that humans will understand who we are, so that even if we someday disappear, someone will remember we existed." Daniel picked up the crystal carefully. It was heavy and warm. When he looked into it, he could see swirling patterns of light deep inside. "I'm honored," Daniel said, his voice shaking with emotion. "But your people aren't going to disappear. You're safe now. You're protected. Because of you," the elder said. "Because you saw a crying mother and chose compassion over fear. That choice saved us all." The ceremony continued. Each clan of dragons presented gifts.
Tools made from mountain metals.
Fabrics woven from special plants that grew only in dragon territories. Art pieces carved from stone. Every gift was unique and beautiful. But the most meaningful gift came from Arya. She approached with her child, the first young dragon Daniel had saved. The baby was no longer a baby. It had grown large and strong, its scales a brilliant emerald green. Through Karen's translation, Arya spoke directly to Daniel. "My child lives because of you. I want to give you something no dragon has ever given a human before. A name. In our language, you are Keish Venthor. It means healer of children and friend of dragons. You are part of our clan now, part of our family." The young dragon stepped forward and pressed its forehead against Daniel's chest. It was the gesture of family, the deepest sign of trust and affection in dragon culture. Daniel hugged the dragon's head, tears streaming down his face. All around them, the dragons sang. Their voices rose in harmony, filling the valley with sound. It was a song of gratitude, of survival, of hope for the future. The ceremony lasted hours. By the end, Daniel and his team had received more gifts than they could carry. But more importantly, they had witnessed something incredible: the formal establishment of friendship between two intelligent species. Over the following months, the relationship between humans and dragons continued to grow. The dragons taught the humans about the mountains and the planet's ecology. They shared knowledge about plants with medicinal properties and showed the humans caves filled with useful minerals. In return, the humans shared their technology and science. They set up communication systems so dragons and humans could talk easily. They established trade agreements, exchanging goods and services. The dragons were particularly interested in human medicine and asked to learn more about healing techniques. Lisa worked with the Colonial Council to redraw maps and establish official borders. The dragon territories were marked as sovereign land. No human could enter without permission. The dragons, in turn, agreed to peaceful coexistence with the colony. Young dragons sometimes came to the institute to learn from the human scientists. They were curious and intelligent students. Peter started teaching a young dragon named Skyfire about chemistry. The dragon learned quickly and even suggested new ways to synthesize compounds using mountain plants. Alex discovered that dragons had an incredible ability to sense changes in the environment. They could predict weather patterns days in advance and detect seismic activity before earthquakes happened. This knowledge proved invaluable for protecting the human colony. Karen completed her translation work and published a full dragon-human dictionary. Humans could now learn the dragon language, and some colonists did. Schools started teaching basic dragon communication to children. A new generation was growing up knowing the dragons as neighbors and friends. 1 year after the vaccine program, Daniel received an unexpected visitor. A government official from Earth arrived with a team of diplomats. The official's name was Catherine Moore, and she had been sent to formally establish diplomatic relations with the dragons. Earth wants to recognize the dragons as a sovereign nation, Catherine explained in a meeting with Daniel and Lisa. This would give them full rights under interstellar law, but we need their agreement. Daniel arranged a meeting with the dragon elders. The discussion took place in a large cave in the mountains lit by glowing crystals. Catherine and her team sat on one side. 20 dragon elders sat on the other, with Arya serving as the primary speaker. Through Karen's translation, the dragons made their position clear. They welcomed friendship with humanity, but they had no interest in joining human political structures. They had lived independently for thousands of years and intended to continue doing so. However, they agreed to a formal alliance. Humans and dragons would be partners, protecting and supporting each other. Catherine agreed to those terms. The treaty was signed, or rather marked. The dragons used a special bioluminescent ink from their scales to mark the document. When they touched it, their unique light patterns appeared on the paper, serving as their signatures. The treaty established several key points. Dragons would be recognized as a sentient species with full rights. Their territories would be protected in perpetuity. Humans would provide medical assistance and technology support. Dragons would share their knowledge of the planet and help protect human settlements from natural disasters. And most importantly, neither species would interfere in the other's internal affairs. It was a good treaty, one that respected both sides. Catherine left New Haven satisfied, carrying the historic document back to Earth. Within months, similar treaties were being discussed with other alien species across the galaxy. The Dragon Alliance became a model for human-alien relations. Daniel's work continued.